Welcome to Political Trade Secrets, an inside look at campaigns and politics, where we pull back the curtain, look under the hood, and investigate all aspects of politics and how elections are won. Now, here's your host, Dustin Olson.
And welcome to Political Trade Secrets. I'm your host, Dustin Olson. Thank you to everybody who's joining us here from across the country, across the world, on 12 different platforms. We are live streaming right now. And if you're on Facebook, if you're on Twitch, if you're on Twitter, if you're on YouTube, you name it, wherever you're at, thank you for joining us today to have this great conversation about an important strategic mindset, a strategic principle that if you keep this idea in your head, you're more likely to actually have your vision become reality. And that is simply plan your work and work your plan. We're going to talk about that, have a few pro tips for that as well. And thank you very much for joining us here, because really what we're doing is we're here to inspire and empower our fellow Americans to be the most effective citizens possible, but also to be powerful political leaders right there in their community, in their state, and for our country. And you can be a part of that. First of all, you can be a part of it today by joining the conversation. You can post a comment or question wherever you're at. And we really do appreciate everybody who does join the conversation. Additionally, you can become a member of the Political Trade Secrets Insiders, get exclusive stuff. Go to politicaltradesecrets.com. Right there, that's where you go. You can watch all the different shows that we've had in the past and then be a part of that community. Additionally, to be a part of that community, it's as simple as texting me at 202-918 3345. Again, that's 202-918-3345, and we will text you any of the resources from the program today. We also text out the link to the show when we go live every single day, so please do join us there. And of course, you can like the show, you can wow the show, you can love the show, and really, if you want to help empower or inspire some conservative out there that maybe you never even knew they thought they might want to run for office, but you share this program on your Facebook or on Twitter or wherever, and you inspire them to step up, to show up and speak up, well then join the Share Force. So join Share Force, make a difference, help reignite American patriotism. It's as simple as sharing the program from wherever you're at, retweeting it, or sending it by carrier pigeon, whatever you need to do. We would love to have you be a part of the program, and it really does make a difference for all who are able to do that. We do appreciate that. And that sounds like someone's at the door, so I'm going to go check and see who that might be. It's been a few days. It looks like it is our friendly neighborhood Sean Bartley. Sean, how you doing?
Hey, good morning to you. Good morning to everyone out there. Glad to be able to join you again. Sorry for the brief hiatus there.
Well, you've been on the road, and you've been on the ground, and you've been in the trenches, and we do appreciate you being out there making a difference for our country, helping reignite American patriotism where it matters. There on the ground, pushing forward the lines of freedom, and we do appreciate you being out there doing that.
Yeah, a lot of patriotism being reignited out there, so very excited about it. And look, you can join the conversation today, and it's an important one about planning, and we're going to get into a lot of great stuff about it. How do you do that? Wherever you are, if you're watching us live, make sure you comment. We actually incorporate that into the show, so don't miss out on that opportunity. If you're watching after the show, make sure you leave your comment or question. We actually go back and follow up on it. It also informs future episodes. So do that. And look, if you are thinking about running for office or wanting to see how you can be the best, most powerful political leader you can be for your district, your state, the country, or even the world, reach out to Olson Strategies. You can email me, Sean, SEAN at olsonstrategies.com or Dustin at olsonstrategies.com. We would love to have a conversation with you about what it takes to run for office and all that. Now, if you are like, hey, you know what, running for office, that's not for me, but I would like to be, maybe behind the scenes and work to get great candidates elected, or maybe you want some sort of leadership role in a campaign, well, reach out to us. Again, use those email addresses. It's Sean, SEAN, at olsonstrategies.com or Dustin at olsonstrategies.com. We're looking for great people to be campaign managers, campaign coordinators, political directors, field directors for different projects and campaigns we got going on all across the country. So don't miss your opportunity to join our team at Olson Strategies.
Yeah, and talking about reigniting American patriotism, this morning I happened to be listening to the Hugh Hewitt program, and as I clicked on, a friend of the show, and a friend of ours, we've known him for many years, Congressman Jim Banks was on talking about the Republican Study Committee. He's expanding and reigniting American patriotism through that, and I was very pleased to hear him talking about renewing American patriotism, and that really is what the Republican Study Committee is working on. Their policy, their agenda that they're working on for Republicans is all focused on reigniting American patriotism. And it's really great to see leaders like him who really are smart people who are really getting to the core of what actually matters. And they see that having a renewal, as he said, of American patriotism in this country is what this country needs at this time. And you can see it. I showed yesterday when you're off, I'm sure you got a chance to see it. I showed some of the footage from Loudoun County, Virginia, where the parents erupted, not just in there's a arrest that night, but also they erupted in singing "God Bless America," and that was so, I guess, annoying, threatening to the school board that they had to declare it an unlawful assembly and kick everybody out of there.
Well, I will say this: it is. I want to acknowledge the parents of Loudoun County for waking up to what they've created over the last 25 years, where they slowly let this creep of liberalism and Marxism into their community. And I have no doubt they thought it was under the guise of inclusivity and being tolerant and all this other stuff. And I think they've woken up in 2021 and said, "Oh,
wow,
they are coming after our very existence."
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the fact is, these folks moved to Loudoun County for a reason. It was to get away from higher taxes and some of the craziness that was either closer to
in Arlington or Alexandria. It seems like people here are a little bit less. I don't know if they're less crazy, but you don't see a lot of that stuff necessarily around here. But yeah, people moved out for a reason because they want to be able to raise their kids in the Virginia countryside, and that's not necessarily what they've got at this point. So it's really interesting. And one of the things that Jim was talking about, and apparently they had Hugh Hewitt at their retreat. They had the retreat last week, and another friend of ours, Congressman Joe Wilson, was there. He's part of the Republican Study Committee. But there's a lot of conversation, and actually they did a poll specifically on some of the things that we've been talking about. We had Ruth Edmonds on a week ago talking about how to talk about critical race theory, and that was one of the things that they polled on. It is an overwhelming number of Americans. It's something like 80-something% who are not having any of it, and they think that this is a huge threat to the country to be promoting this kind of racist education that focuses on people's appearance and their things that just as race is not the thing to be thinking about in this country as to whether somebody is I think we need to get back to what Martin Luther King Jr. said, which is judge people based on the content of their character. And it seems that our education has gotten upside down in the last few years, and none of us were watching. I think maybe when the kids were at home over the last year, all of a sudden parents are watching what their kids are learning, and they were very surprised by all of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's pretty amazing. You go, well, what happened?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people are waking up to that. And I hope in the long term it's something for the better. I do think that that's that's what's going on there. So yeah, it is encouraging what we're seeing in Loudoun County. I think you're seeing it really all across the country. So do that, and I want to and thank you to Jim Banks, who's leading on that. And there are a lot of people who are leading on it, and a lot of great voices out there that are really dedicated to ending this narrative that we're a hateful country based in racism, some of this other stuff, and are committed to reigniting American patriotism.
Yeah.
So,
and part of this is to have a patriotic education is to actually look at our history through a clear lens, warts and all. I mean, we need to teach what actually has happened in our history and the things that from today's vantage point that we know were wrong, and to actually make it, part of the curriculum. But that's not what this is, the current education and what critical race theory. One of the things that Jim talked about, and I saw a great clip of him, and maybe we'll bring it on one of our future shows, of him actually questioning some of the military leadership who are promoting critical race theory in the reading, and how this is more of indoctrination as opposed to an open reading list. Like if they read Marx, well, that would be good to know where it all came from. But this is more of propaganda type of a book that is promoting that the country today is racist. It's interesting. You have people like Steven Pinker and other thinkers who've actually looked at the stats created by lots of different world international organizations. And if you look at almost every metric today on this planet, despite what we see in the media, we actually live in the safest, most prosperous, least divisive, even though it's hard to believe it, age in in U.S. in not just U.S. history but in world history. That you are more likely to be able to live a great life today than you were even able to live 20 years ago on this planet.
Yeah,
and that poverty has shrunk to less than 5% of the world. Just 20 years ago, it was something in like around 30%. It's pretty remarkable what has happened on this planet, and how America really has been that beacon of liberty and freedom and prosperity across the world, and has been a great example. And I would think that it's our enemies, China in particular, that wants to push these narratives. And there's a lot of willing idiots who are being useful idiots out there, fanning those flames along with America's enemies. So I don't know if you had anything else that you've found interesting in the news since we last spoke. They actually had the New York City primary election, and unless something's happened in the last little bit, we still don't know exactly what the outcome is.
So I was glad the little bit I was able to come on, and I think it might have been just in comments. I said it would be after July 4th that we would know who made it through the primary.
Mm-hmm.
I'm feeling confident in that.
Yeah, I think you're going to be proven right.
And and part of it is that New York, and one of the things I said, New York City, New York State, they are notoriously slow at counting ballots for whatever reason already. Then you add in this wrinkle of, basically you're counting 5 ballots. That is up to 5 ballots.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens if it's spoiled? I mean, here's another thing. What if somebody doesn't have a first choice? And for some reason they filled in 2, 3, 4, and 5. What do you do then?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that there's a remedy or prescription for that.
It just makes things so much more complicated. Ranked choice voting, which is what we're talking about here, ranked choice voting. And it's interesting. I talked about a Democrat consultant who has a lot of the same concerns that we have. If anybody who's been a part of this process, regardless of your partisan nature, you get that this is only going to complicate elections, and it's going to reduce the credibility because of that. Because the less transparency you have in the election is ultimately going to reduce its credibility. People are looking at it like, okay, Adams got the most votes. He's the one that people say is their first choice. Anybody else who could possibly end up, quote, winning after that, they ultimately are not the first choice of the people of New York City.
Yeah.
And that reduces their credibility day one.
And people say this is a goal to get people to 50%, so that they have more legitimacy. That's what proponents of this say. Except that we've seen time and time again, people don't get to 50%, even after all of it. Because what you have happen is people vote for their person and they leave. People vote for 2 or 3 people and then they say no thanks. And it becomes a convoluted system to get people to 50%, to create some sort of legitimacy that hey, for 200 plus years we've been able to conduct elections and have them be viewed as legitimate. I don't know that we needed a whole new way of voting.
Yeah.
To solve, it's funny that liberals in particular say that when it comes to election rules, that Republicans have a solution in search of a problem, right?
Yeah. That's what ranked choice voting is. I was wondering if that's what you're about to say. Because
it is. This is something that has never even been stated as a problem. Like, the stated problem isn't, oh, you know what? People don't get 50% plus 1 all the time. So we got to solve that. Now, for those that have thought that, we have runoff elections. So that people actually have to get 50% plus 1. So
they have to make their case in the second round. That's right. Ultimately what matters. Is you now have new candidates. You winnow down the field, and then those people have to make their case based on the choices, as opposed to, in this case, it's all done in a vacuum. You don't get to see how this person matches up with this other person. You might find out, actually, after you do your first choice, that your second and third choices don't really line up the same once you see them actually out there on the campaign trail making their case for each other. You might decide, you know what, the third choice now is a better choice than the second choice was. Now that I know more about these candidates, because let's be honest, second, third, fourth, fifth, these folks are not getting the attention in these situations. So when you get into the runoff, you actually get to know more information about people. It's like a conversation that continues to grow and build, and more information comes to light. It's an important part of the process, and ultimately they're just assuming that people won't be a part of the process, and that's why they want to do it. But we ask, who put the rank and ranked choice voting, and I think because it stinks, and it's really, the question is who does this matter to? And it's the people who are funding these sorts of things. One of the things you saw in these ranked choice voting races in New York City is that there were several billionaires who gave $500,000 or $1 million. In some cases, they were giving this money to each of the front runners. Got $500,000 each. They're ultimately buying influence, and they're using the system to kind of game it. And these are the people who are ultimately going to have the influence based on it. And then you have Andrew Yang, who dropped out in order to be able to give his votes to whoever his second and third choices. That's what he's ultimately doing. So it's a lot of Machiavellian scheming. I don't know if Professor Mauricio Veroli, who we had on before, if he would approve of that use of Machiavellian, but it is ultimately going to create scheming that is not about the issues. It's not about what actually matters to the city. And it's been fascinating, just like the ranked choice voting convention in Virginia was a disaster, and pretty much every convention that's used it has been a disaster. How in Maine you have a situation where the person who got the first votes didn't end up winning. That's just what's happening in a lot of these places. Let's get into the topic of the day, which is plan your work and work your plan. And this is a simple idea that I've heard for many, many years. I would call it a strategic mindset, maybe a strategic principle, or what people call a heuristic, which is a saying that's generally good and will yield good results. And I've used it for years, but I had a thought of where did this come from, and actually did a little bit of research, and it came from Napoleon Hill, who's famous for writing this book, Think and Grow Rich, which I've never actually read the whole book, but I had an old copy of it at the bottom shelf of my bookshelf, and I thought, it'd be interesting to go look up what he actually said about this idea. And it's a really powerful idea that, you know, I think anybody who's a leader, and that's where he has it in his book, it's the major attributes of leadership. But before I go into what he has said about it, what does this mean to you, Sean, and what do you think people can get from taking on this strategic mindset of plan your work and work your plan?
Yeah, well, I just know that anytime I actually have a plan, and for my day, my week, a campaign, anything that we're doing or anything that I'm doing in particular, there are specific things that require action, that you take action on, and that spur the things that matter. And any time that is lacking, then it can just be like, taking on the whims of whatever the loudest thing is that comes up. And so those are kind of the things that can be at play. So
yeah, it's like fly by the seat of your pants. That's mm-hmm. what ultimately, as we sometimes say, that you're dealing with alligators in the boat. Mm-hmm. Instead of what you actually know you need to deal with out there on the horizon, you're dealing with alligators in the boat, and ultimately the circumstances are making the decisions for you as to what you're going to be focusing on. And I think about it as a continuum. You have planning your work, and then you have working your plan, and you have to be constantly in between both of those. Yep. It's why the idea of a campaign plan that you make at the very beginning of the campaign, and then you never revisit and you never deal with going forward, really does not work for the campaign, because it has to be, to borrow a term from the liberals, a living document. This is where that actually makes a difference, is you want to have a campaign plan that actually you're in all the time, you're updating it on a weekly, even daily basis, that you're actually planning your work and then working your plan. And it gives you a sense of sturdiness, it gives you a sense of direction. And when the storm hits, it's what's going to have you ultimately come back to what will make a difference. It actually gives you some direction when all the stuff goes forward. So I'm going to read what he actually had to say, and we're going to do that. So here we go. Okay, so he has what he calls the 11 major attributes of leadership. I'm going to actually just read these. The following are important factors of leadership. One is unwavering courage. Second is self-control. Third is a keen sense of justice. 4 is definiteness of decision. 5 is definiteness of plans, which we're going to get into a little bit. I'm going to read a little bit more what he had to say there. And then the habit of doing more than paid for. 7 is a pleasing personality. 8 is sympathy and understanding. 9 is mastery of detail. And 10 is willingness to assume full responsibility. And 11 is cooperation. These are all really excellent things to really focus on, and recommend people check all those out. And then I'm going to specifically go to the definiteness of plans. He says the successful leader must plan his work and work his plan, and that's where the famous quote comes from. Mm-hmm. A leader who moves by guesswork without practical, definite plans is comparable to a ship without a rudder. Sooner or later, he will land on the rocks. You saw maybe that we had as an emoji half of a ship. That's what the iPhone gives you, as a half a ship, which is probably not a good ship. You want to have a full one, in my opinion. But anyway, so
I saw Titanic when it became half a ship. It
usually means it's going down. Yes, yeah. They don't float as well that way. But sooner or later, if you don't have a rudder, sooner or later you're going to end up on the rocks, and that's ultimately what happens. And when to use that metaphor and continue that metaphor, is when the storm hits, and pretty much anytime you're doing anything big, there's going to be a storm hits. And all you need to do when the storm hits is the distractions, your phone might be blowing up or something like that. You just throw the phone away, and you turn it off, and you look back at your plan, which I know you have one of these, like what you're actually doing for the day. and then you just look at it and like, okay, this is what I'm up to. This is all I'm up to. The rest of the stuff they're distractions. They're just going to pull me off of what the actual plan is. And it may not work all the time. Sometimes you have to maybe spend a little bit of time with updating your plan in the middle of the day. But the truth is, when the chaos hits, your plan and working your plan is always going to bring a little bit more integrity, a little bit more power into your situation. In my opinion, that's what ultimately is going to make the difference when you do that. So what say you, Sean?
Yeah, look, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly that there are 3, 4, 5 things that you can actually do in the day that make the difference, and move forward what it is that you're setting out to do in the world. And so, when you are clear about doing those things and those things only, and saying, you know what, and like that these are things that are going to make a difference. Now you have to be on the lookout. Maybe there is something that comes along that changes that, but most of the time that's going to be what makes the difference, and be able to execute on it. So encourage everyone to do that. I know that, like I said, the times I do that, a lot more things get done, and things go well. When that doesn't happen, well then. You can get off course pretty quickly.
Absolutely. And, there's a lot of people who like to bring chaos into situations. I can think of a lot of people on campaigns who are muckrakers, and, frankly, they're not the most effective people, but they like to scream in the middle of the chaos and say, they like to get everybody up in arms about stuff and get people focused on the little things. And the truth is, the people who are focused on the big things are the ones who are going to actually move the ball along. And we have a question here from the audience. How can candidates stay focused on a daily plan to make sure that they are able to get what they need done for their campaigns, such as fundraising call time? The truth is, if a candidate is spending time messaging the kitchen cabinet about needless, unimportant things, they're most likely not doing their fundraising calls, and they're most likely not doing what's actually needed for the campaign at that time, which is a very good question. So what can they do? Well, the first thing is, when they look at what they have to get done for that day and it doesn't include all of their time on fundraising, well, then they're probably doing the wrong thing. And they're probably out of control themselves, and they're blaming other people for their inability to do the one thing that matters, which is enroll other people into their vision, and to do so in a way that actually makes a difference by donating money to their campaign. So I'd like to get into a little bit of what I would say are my pro tips for this idea of definiteness of plans.
But I'd like to give everyone a pro tip before we get into that, and that is, if you are trying to reach the most people you can in a one-on-one, human-to-human fashion, call the experts at Grassfire. Get connected with them at www.grassfire.us, and they do canvassing, petitioning, live calling. It's really your way to have a human-to-human interaction, conversation that would make the difference. In many campaigns, this will be the only interaction that someone has with another human being. So, what is causing that to take hold? What is having that make a difference? Well, it is being able to do it on a big enough scale that you are actually having impact. So reach out to Grassfire. It's www.grassfire.us, and get your complimentary consultation scheduled today.
Perfect. Excellent. Well, thank you very much for doing that. And that is a great tip for anybody who's interested in doing great on their campaign, having great people represent them. All right. So pro tips for plan your work and work your plan. First one, pro tip: begin with the end in mind. Ask the question, where do you start? Well, you start at the end. honestly, if you're in the great question that we got about their daily plan, well, think about from the end of tonight, like tonight, at the end of the day, looking back on today, if this was a great day, what will have happened today? What are those few things that will have happened today? And if you can get clarity about that just on your daily plan, then that's going to make a huge difference. Pro tip number 2 I have is it is two sides of a coin. You need to constantly keep both in focus. Plan your work your plan, plan your work your plan. You just come back and forth, go back and forth, go back and forth. Because it's just like the ship metaphor is the ship is always off course, but it's always, if you know where you're going, if you know where the end you have in mind, you're always working towards it. You're always tacking back and forth. You're adjusting the rudder as you're going. You're adjusting the sails. So you're always coming back and forth to get to your destination. Pro tip number 3 I have is keep it simple. If you have a million things on your plan for the day, you're probably not focused and you're not bringing strategic focus to what you are up to. Then I would say pro tip number 4, and this is continuing on with the ship metaphor, is focus on trim tabs. And this is the idea of a trim tab is actually on a ship or on an airplane. You have the rudder, but then at the edge of the rudder, there's a thing called a trim tab. It's where the rudder might move like this, but then the trim tab will do a little extra turn. And then when it does that, it can have a huge ship. It's that one little place, like with a one little flap, that with that movement, with that little extra leverage, that you can move a giant ship at even greater velocity and have much more control. So the idea of a trim tab is find what actions will yield the most action, like what will yield the most results. And if you did those things consistently in a big enough way, which is likely going to be fundraising call time and actually calling people, if you do those consistently in a big enough way, that that's going to make a difference for your campaign. So next is pro tip 5. Order is the antidote to chaos. And remember that when you're in the middle of a storm, and you don't know what to do, like there's just a whole bunch of stuff happening around you and you're like, I don't know what to do at this moment, simply look down your plan for the day, your plan for the week, your plan overall, and look at what is there next to do and start executing. Now, it may not be the absolute best perfect thing to do, yet it is going to make the biggest difference if you begin executing the next step, because more often than not, you'll begin bringing order and power back to the situation, and you'll start bringing things back into order, and you're going to give yourself a little bit more space actually to think about what are other actions that might make a difference. So those are my pro tips that I have. And Sean, would you have anything else that you'd add as a pro tip to that?
I don't have anything to add. I think these are really great. You know, really beginning with the end in mind and thinking about like where is it that you're going. You know, when you go into Waze, you put the destination.
Yep.
And it doesn't say, well, I'm going to just drive down this highway for a while and see what happens. If you are actually heading somewhere. Because it can't tell you, oh, you'll be there in 2 hours if you don't put in a destination. So I think that's really great and a great way to look at it. And then, planning your work and working your plan and really just having that in a loop where, these things are continuing to happen is really critical there. Keeping it simple. People are going to want to do everything, particularly in a campaign. You're going to want to do everything. Now, we've talked about on this show before, we love direct mail, right? But sometimes direct mail doesn't make any sense.
Yep.
Maybe the candidate is best suited for, visual mediums and really being able to talk more. Yeah, you might have a candidate that isn't suited that way. Okay, well then, anything a good photographer can do and direct mail and some other things, that might be the thing to make happen. Maybe it's a small enough race where that makes sense. So, look, what it is that makes a difference, the tactics that underlie the what works in the campaign, or what the goal is of the campaign. Mm-hmm. You want to just keep it simple.
Yeah.
And then focus on trim tabs. I thought you put that very well, kind of how that goes and what that looks like.
Yeah, what matters most.
And then
what will have the most impact.
And then it's really just determining that, like, okay, this is what can make a difference today. So anyone, just look for that day after day after day. So, and then order in the is the antidote for chaos. Absolutely. And just so again, kind of knowing where you're going, and then being able to explain that. And it's understandable for others that you're going to have a lot of well-meaning people in your campaign, and they're only going to be able to see a part of it, or mm-hmm. they're going to be able to see what other people are doing, and they want to get caught up in that. Not unusual. So just being able to calmly say, hey, here are the things that are happening. Here are the things at our disposal now, and being able to go out and execute every day on that. So
that's excellent. And just a final thought to pull it all together is that if you're out to be a political leader in the world, then you care about political power, because ultimately, and we talk about power in a different way than most people do. Power really is your intentions, how you say you want things to go, becoming reality. So if you have a certain policy that you say, this is the policy that needs to be put in place for our country, for my state, for my city, and then it becomes reality, well, that is power. It is that your intention of how you thought things should go actually became true. And at the end of the day, how do you make the things that you want to have happen? Well, that's all going to show up in a plan. So as we said, begin with the end in mind. That's why we talk about vision so much, is that when you step out there into the future, into many years after your service is done, and you think about what it is that I have accomplished, what's available now, what's happened because I served, that is the vision. And your plan is you have the where you're going, you have the what landscape you're going to traverse to get there, you have how you're going to get there, and then you're going to go and do it. And that's ultimately what we call our 4 pillars of strategy. But that is ultimately what the power is that you've come up with your plan, you continue to adjust your plan, but it's also happening that you're working that plan over and over again. And this is how you actually have power, is you plan your work and you work your plan. That is the essence of how power actually comes into being. You have to know what it is that you're actually doing, what you're planning to do, as opposed to doing things willy-nilly. And then you have to work your plan, actually have action happen, because action really is the only thing that's ever impacted reality, is actions that you take, and then the actions that you don't take, and then the results that you get from that. So ultimately, if you care about being a political leader and having power to have your intentions become reality, then plan your work and work your plan. And with that, one of the ways that you might have a part of your plan, and one of the tactics you might have be a part of your plan and be one of the things that you work throughout your campaign, would be 10-cent texting. And would you like to tell people about 10-cent texting?
Absolutely. Where does it happen? Right here on your mobile device. Look, 82% of people open every text message they get. 90% of people open it within 3 minutes. And it is a way to be interactive. It is a way to get an image, GIF, short video right there in the body of the text message and sent to the voters who need to hear from you most. Actually talked with a voter who actually received a text that 10-cent texting put together this week, and they said it was professional. It showed that the candidate knew what they were doing and had a clear, crisp message that they wanted to get out to people. And so that was it's a real testament not only to how the technology and everything works, which is great, but it's also a testament to the candidates who go to 10centtexting.com, download those 8 pro tips, to a successful political text and actually exercise those pro tips. So go check that out for yourself today.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And of course, as always, join us at politicaltradesecrets.com. Sign up to be a Political Trade Secrets Insider. Get exclusive stuff. Check out all of our previous episodes. We do love everybody who's been a part of that community. And speaking of community, you can join our texting community, easily get resources from the show. You can get a link every day when we go live as to the show that we're having that day. You can text me at 202-918-3345. Again, that's 202-918-3345. It's really fun to get text messages from people with their thoughts about what's important in politics right now, questions about things in the news, how to talk about stuff. We do appreciate it. We always do incorporate your thoughts from either the comments and questions and or from the texting community. Thank you very much to everybody who's texted me at 202-918-3345. And thank you, Sean, for all the great work that you do for our candidates and for our country and all that you're doing to make a difference in the world. And you know what? When you're out there and you're making things happen, the people who don't make things happen, they tend to get their in a bunch. And that's just something that happens in the world. And, be one of the people who plans your work and works your plan. And just when all the chaos hits, you're the person you're going to do that. And it's going to make the difference in politics. It's going to have you be a political leader who has the ability to help reignite American patriotism. Any final thoughts that you have for today's show?
No, well, I want to thank you for really bringing this strategic mindset to the forefront. It's always a great reminder. I mean, even planning for this show, I've seen that even more things happening as I've been executing on things in our work outside of this. So it really is a great tool and a great reminder. And so keeping it alive, and it's another reminder of what you do daily gets done.
Yep.
So
that's right. It's the reason we're creating the strategic mindsets is really like a strategic tool set that you have of all these different mindsets, what we call strategic principles or strategic distinctions, lots of different ways to say it, but ultimately they're easy, simple to remember phrases that if you really keep them in front of your mind, you will be more likely to be successful. What you do daily gets done. Plan your work your plan, and when in doubt, call somebody. These are ideas. Opportunity is a function of the number of conversations you have for opportunity. These are ideas that when you focus on them, you're more likely to get things done that actually make a difference for the country and for your campaign. And we do appreciate it. So with that, thank you to everybody for being a part of the show. This has been another episode of Political Trade Secrets.
Join us next time by subscribing on iTunes and get show notes and sign up for our newsletter at politicaltradesecrets.com.